はい。皆さん、こんにちは。ジョーです。今日はですね、皆さんもご存知の、世界的にも超有名の、NFT プロジェクトでもあり、IP のですね、プロジェクトとしても非常に有名になっております、パジーペンギンの、CEO のルカさんに、来ていただいております。Okay, thank you, Luca, for your time. I'm pretty honored to have you here. Today, we'd like to ask, of course, about Pudgy Penguins, but I believe people in Japan have a image of NFT, but now Pudgy Penguin is much, much, much more than that. So we would like to know more about those sides as well. But before going too much detail, is that okay? You introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. I'm Luca I'm the CEO of Pudgy Penguins. I'm not the creator of Pudgy Penguins. About 2.5, 3 years ago, we decided to buy the project for $2.5 million. And the idea was we wanted to become the mascot for crypto and the face for penguins around the world. And so I actually love that I'm speaking to a Japanese audience because Japan is the king of IP. You guys are the leaders of IP. And I think a lot of our strategy was to emulate a lot of the Japanese brands, right? Like how did Hello Kitty find success? How did, other Sanrio properties find success in Bandai and some of the other, major conglomerates over there? And so a lot of what we're doing is meeting the consumer where they are, making toys, making content, growing socials, and really trying to grow the love of an IP the same way that you would if you were building, a regular IP in Japan or other parts of Asia or the rest of the world. But with crypto origins, I think that's pretty important. So it's been a wild ride over the last 2.5 years, but it's I think going to get even more exciting here over the next 2.5. And excited to chat with you today, Joe.
Thank you. It might be a long story, but how did you happen to buy the Pudgy Penguins? What was the motivation?
Yeah, I think for me, I was a big holder of the Penguins. And if you remember what kind of kicked off the NFT craze in 2021, it was really punks, apes, and penguins. And when that whole hype was kind of going on, punks and apes continued to do their thing. But, penguins were started by a bunch of 18-year-olds in their college dorm basement, and at no fault to them, they just didn't have the professional expertise to kind of keep the brand moving forward. As a big collector, I always saw the vision. Like when I closed my eyes, I could always see, Pudgy Penguins as a billion-dollar IP brand. And then I started to see all the success in the real world, or in the NFT world, through all the successful raises through venture and community off of this narrative that they were building this next generation brand. But they weren't doing a lot of things that I think traditional brands need to do to find success. And so I thought there was a huge opportunity to kind of disrupt and to win. And so it was a little bit of a risk, but we bought the project and we kind of built on those two theses. I think we've kind of pioneered what it is to build IP in crypto. I think we're the first true ever breakthrough IP and breakthrough consumer brand to come out of the space. And so thankful it happened the way that it did, but it was a wild ride up until this point.
Sounds great. And now you have a physical merchandise and also card games. And you recently bought the frame, now turning into layer two, which is called now Abstrct Chain. Um, I know you have many things going on, but what are the businesses that you run aside from those NFT stuff?
Yes, when I think the Igloo, which is behind me, is the holding company that holds Pudgy Penguins, holds Overpass, which is our licensing platform, and contributes to Abstract. And when you look at the core mission of the Igloo is, built to bring millions of people on chain. And so, one vertical is through Pudgy Penguins, leveraging IP and story and love and character to bring people on in a way that is, not predicated on price going up or price going down. Overpass kind of, brings that tie together between, holder and, NFT and brand in a way that I think is super unique. And I think Abstract for us is like, we set a playbook in this industry around what it is to kind of break through to mass. And a lot of people are following in our footsteps. And rather than following in our footsteps and going off into another ecosystem to do it, we now have an ecosystem that is really predicated around, crypto being the back end and not the front end, really predicated around mass consumer adoption and being consumer centric and optimizing for the consumer experience so that people who want to build in the same ethos that Pudgy Penguins is built, they can now build on this chain. I think for us, we've kind of been, I think, the face of consumer crypto for the last 2 years. And we really just want to keep pushing this consumer crypto boundary because I ultimately think that it's the final frontier and the most important frontier, right? Like crypto has to power people's everyday lives. And I think from an abstract perspective, it's really, innovating on account abstraction. We're really innovating on what it means to look, to tie users and builders and chain alignment together. We just announced panoramic governance, which I think is a new novel mechanism and how these things are ultimately intertwined. But I think most importantly, I think what we're bringing, to the chain, the blockchain ecosystem is one of the most powerful communities in crypto. I think it's this ethos around, understanding on how to build for consumer and optimizing that experience for the consumer. And I think last but not least is just bringing this top of funnel distribution and this code that we've kind of cracked in terms of, getting billions of views and millions of people to fall in love with something and bringing that into an ecosystem that can uplift the entire, crypto industry, not just one single project, in this case, Pudgy Penguins. So I think at its core, like everything we do is to bring millions of people on chain. I think when you look at Pudgy Penguins is doing an amazing job of that. And I think Abstrakt is now the chain that we're bringing millions of people onto, right? It just seemed like a really great way to kind of complete the loop. And when you're thinking about an ecosystem and what that flywheel looks like, this seemed like the final missing puzzle to the equation that I thought was really meaningful. So, this is ultimately where we are today, but, still have a long ways to go. And I think for us from an Abstrakt perspective, I think it's going to open a lot of really exciting and interesting doors for our community and for our ecosystem over the next couple of months.
Are you particularly building something on your own, or at the same time, are you expecting some people building on you, of course? But what kind of dApps or what kind of product is coming onto the chain?
Yeah, so I think for Abstrakt, we want to own one emotion and one category in crypto, I think, to really kick things off, and that category is fun. Right. So right now we have 250 people that are building on top of Abstrakt, and they're all building fun and viral applications. I tell people this all the time, and we've actually turned away half of the builders, which is kind of counterintuitive because naturally, most chains want as many deployments as possible because that's how they accrue fees. But I really just want to find success and want to see people win. So, I think we've taken the unorthodox approach in the sense that, like, if you're building the next great DeFi innovation, like, there's other chains to go build that on top of, right? If you're building fun and viral, this is the best chain to build on top of because I think nobody from a chain level understands fun and viral the way that we do. So I want you to hold me accountable, Joe. But, when you hop into the Abstrakt ecosystem 6 to 12 months from now, I want you to be like, this is the most fun place in crypto. And the easiest experience for me to ultimately navigate. I think blockchains are transitioning from like these payment rails in which like things are fragmented and built on top of one another to, I think you're going to see this new age of like blockchain powered platforms and almost think of it as like a super app. I think this is where blockchains are going because naturally, if you understand what blockchains intrinsically solve and the properties that they naturally solve, they solve a lot of the things that would kind of stop you from building a super app, right? And so, global composability, global liquidity, this really curated consumer experience. Ultimately, I think it has to be, built into a platform and a singular interface in which somebody can interact with a certain chain or a certain ecosystem. So I think we're going to reinvent the meta here. It's going to be an interesting case study. I'm very confident in our ability to kind of push that boundary and set the tone as to how I think people are looking at these things. And I'm happy to shock the world here in probably the next 5 to 6 weeks.
Sounds great. The image of the NFT project is like, not much money, is used to be really dead, but what you're building is like costs a lot of stuff. For example, I create merchandising and building chain and everything else. It's really, really like physical stuff costs you a lot. But how did you make the comeback also? You can't do it overnight, right?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up because I think if you look at the Pudgy Penguins success story and you throw the lens on the story and you kind of like look at it through the fact that we bought this business for $2.5 million. We bootstrapped it with $500,000. We raised $9 million. But if you look at like previous, the incumbents, the NFT incumbents, our closest competitor, raised $100 million, right? The biggest, the biggest NFT project raised north of $1 billion, right, from community and venture. And I think the fact that we've just performed so well during this dire time against all odds with as little money and resources that we had, I think makes the story that much more impressive. And I think also sets the tone for, I think, a lot of builders and people in the space and community members to be like, hey, you don't need $10 million to build something awesome. Look at what these guys did. They did it with, just the boot of their strap and $500,000, which they were able to, kind of stretch over the course of, a year and a half. Then they raised $9 million, but, that's not that much compared to the next person. And so I think that was just a lot of like our back was against the wall, and we got dealt some really bad cards, and, we're in the business of winning, right? Like I'm not in the business of just, signing up to something and losing. That seems really unorthodox to my nature. So I think from that perspective, it was really, really, I think it's really, really impressive. And so I think a lot of people can kind of learn from that. And next time you see somebody trying to raise $50 million for their idea, you point them no further than the igloo and tell them like, hey, look, you don't need the money because these guys did something super impressive with a fraction of the dollar. So hopefully it sets the tone for the space. Obviously, the space does what the space does, but I think that's probably the thing I'm most proud about in this entire journey.
Thank you. NFT community normally, it's about 10,000 people in it, but what you guys doing is much bigger. And how do you see the sense of community between those just NFT project and Pudgy Penguins? Is it very different, or how do you see this?
I think Pudgy Penguins, naturally attracts a really kind person, a really diverse person, right? Like I've always believed that the Pudgy Penguin was the most universal IP in the space. And I thought that's important because, being universal means there's a lot of room for demand. And because the NFT is a finite, collectible, it's really just like supply and demand shocks, and ultimately price goes up. Right. And so I think, being universal is super important. I think it also creates a really great culture. There's boys, there's girls, there's, white people, Asian people, people from Africa, people from Europe. I think it's probably one of the most diverse and welcoming communities. And that's just by nature of the PFP. Like the PFP attracts that. I also think from like a community perspective, the thing that I think is most impressive about Pudgy Penguins is really the access that it gives you, right? Like when you wear a Pudgy Penguin PFP, you are aligning yourselves with some of the best traders, some of the best executives, some of the best builders in crypto. And that gives you access to them in a super meaningful way. I mean, I've personally, done deals with people worth hundreds of thousands of dollars simply because they had a Pudgy Penguin PFP. And I know there's a lot of cases like this. People get jobs, BD becomes easier. So it's interesting how these PFPs kind of work in that sense, right? Like there's a lot of doors that can kind of open. But I think from our perspective, it's really just about setting values, right? Like we just want to do good for people. We just want to do good for crypto. We just want to do good for the space. And I think people really rally behind that, right? It's probably one of crypto's only case studies of like a feel-good brand that uplifts everyone, that speaks to everyone, whether you're 5 years old or 60 years old or a man or a woman. And I think that's what really makes the appeal so powerful here. And ultimately, the Pudgy Penguin and, so exciting to most. So hopefully that answers your question. I think I steered a little off course there.
Yeah, thank you. And I saw your tweets about Comic-Con. That was in, LA or somewhere in, I think,
San Diego.
San Diego, right. And then that was full of Web2 giants like Lego, SpongeBob, Star Wars, and Hello Kitty. And you guys are in the middle of those giants. I think you guys got the really nice square right in the middle. How was the feeling of being there, and what are the learnings from those big guys?
I think it feels great. I mean, this is what we've been trying to do, right? Like we were in Walmart in 2,000 stores, and it was literally Star Wars, Pudgy Penguins, and then Hello Kitty. And I think this is like, again, goes down to the story of what's going on here. Like this is the first time we've ever seen this in crypto in the last 15 years. Like we haven't seen anything like this before. And I think this is what makes this really exciting. I think from, what do we learn? Like, I think a lot of people try to reinvent what makes an NFT valuable, right? An NFT is a digital collectible. What makes a first edition Charizard valuable or a Michael Jordan Fleer base, basketball card? It's affinity, it's love, it's legacy, it's greatness, right? So like, when we're in 10,000 retailers and we get billions of views every single month, like when we do these things, like we're just cementing our legacy and becoming a historic figure within the space. And if we just do that long enough and consistently enough, it ultimately, kind of compounds and you kind of see this huge success story. So I think from our perspective, always learning from the legacy Web2 IP guys in terms of like, what does it mean to build love and products that people love? I think this is really important. Stories that people love. And then obviously, like, how do we bring our like Gen Z twist and, amplify this stuff on socials and get the crypto community involved? But we're always learning. And I think that's really important. I think you have to understand what you're good at and what you're not. And, we do things better than some of those brands, and they do some things that are better than us. So I think it's just about, combining those learnings, applying it, and, trying to represent crypto in the best way possible.
Thank you. And since you just mentioned about the Walmart, I think create the merchandise and sell it in the Walmart sounds like a moonshot to the NFT community. But maybe from your point, that's obvious, way of selling merchandise. But that was your idea, or they approached you, or how did it happen?
Yeah, so my previous business, I was one of Walmart's best-selling toys prior to this. So I had a relationship with them. And then when we bought Pudgy Penguins, we basically bought it at the beginning of the bear market, right? So like NFTs have been in a bear market even up until today. They haven't gone out of one yet. And, with the exception of like Pudgy Penguins defying a little bit of those odds. But I think from our perspective, it was a really rough time when we took over. And so royalties went to zero and market went to zero. And so we bought this thing, said we were going to make it number one. And it seemed like we had to lean into our core competencies a little quicker than we wanted to, but that's kind of how that happened. Now it's important to note, it took a lot of meetings, a lot of convincing, and ultimately they put us in the most premier, extravagant, important program that Walmart, the world's biggest retailer, does, which is, a pallet program in Q4. A pallet program is basically a giant pallet, a box, that sits in the middle of the store that, is basically the most prized piece of real estate, and what is the world's biggest retailer. So it was a pretty crazy experience, but a lot of that had to do with like how we were innovating. So if people are not familiar, Pudgy toys come with a QR code. When you scan the QR code, you redeem 3 to 5 NFTs. You put an email and a password. You're given a custody wallet, and this is all done on Abstrct, right? So Abstrct is powering this entire consumer experience. Abstrct is the chain that is in Walmart, that is in Target, that is in these different places, and it's powering this entire experience. And before that, it was another chain and another chain, and ultimately we just needed to refine that experience to be really refined for what I thought like the consumer deserved. And ultimately, I think no one was kind of addressing the problems that we needed to be addressed. And we had to do it ourselves. So nonetheless, I think this is kind of what's really exciting about this whole story and this whole flow is like, these guys, defied all odds, put these things into Walmart, put these things into Target, Hot Topic, Smith's. I mean, there isn't a retailer around the world, Toys R Us. I mean, there's so many. And, a lot of that was done, through this like combining of, Web3 and crypto. And, when you're selling a toy, you're really selling, a QR code that's bringing people on chain, right? Like that's a really beautiful story when you think about it. And the other side of it is, every toy that you see is actually licensed from the NFT holder. So each toy is an NFT that lives on chain. It's owned by somebody else. And every time they sells, they get a royalty in perpetuity that gets paid out annually. So if you just combine the entire story, it's just pretty magical to say the least.
Yeah, I think it's pretty amazing. I think nobody else can do that, or I think even in the future, I don't really see this is happening for some other project. And now you guys on the screen of New York Stock Exchange for the other day. What was that about? You guys, that was a promotion or?
Yeah, so for those who are not familiar, Van Eck did their entire Ethereum ETF commercial with a Pudgy Penguin. And so Vanek has a Pudgy Penguin via PFP on Twitter. Vanek is one of the biggest, funds in the world and in terms of like, assets under management. And they're just peng pilled. They love the Penguins. They support the Penguins. And they're just constantly throwing us layups. So they got us on the New York Stock Exchange at the closing bell. I think we've got some other things that we're working on with them, but it's really exciting.
Yeah, that was quite surprising. And now I think in Japan, it's very hard to see Pudgy Penguins merchandise or anything else other than NFT. How's the awareness in the US? Is it changing or is it a different story?
Yeah, in the US, it's huge. In parts of Asia, it's huge. Japan is really hard to break through. So we've got some collectibles releasing in Harajuku. I forget this store. I think it's Sutang Collectibles. If I'm not wrong, I know there's some things in Shibuya Parko that we're going to be releasing some collectibles there. But it's hard to break through in Japan. We've got an exclusive blind box set that we're going to release in both of these places. But it's not as easy as America. I mean, ultimately, like Japan, I think knows its power. It knows what it holds in specifically IP and character. And I think they really make you earn your stripes over there. So hopefully, hopefully somebody listening can help us out. But I think we're good in America. Like we know how to make things hot in the West. We still have a long ways to go. And Asia is just naturally really loving the IP and the character. So it's going to be interesting to watch over the next couple of years.
Okay. Yeah, I think Pudgy Penguin is a character that Japanese people would really, really like. So if that's exposed, I think you guys kind of are big fans there. So hopefully I can do something for you. But anyway, yeah, I'm looking forward to the events. And from here, you partially mentioned, but what are the things that we can expect? Something exciting?
It's these next 6 months. You just need to follow at Pudgy Penguins, follow at Abstrct Chain on X.com, and stay tuned. I mean, we're really going to shake up the world. Like I got some things that nobody knows we've got coming. So it's going to be pretty exciting.
Okay. And also, can you tell us when you come into Japan? I mean, those stores and so on?
I will be in Japan in 6 months. So Joe, I'm going to reach out to you when I'm there. I'll be there June of next year.
June. Okay. I'll make sure I'll be there for the events.
Cool.
Okay. I think time's up. Thank you so much for your time. I'm really, really excited having this interview and that my audience can watch this. And is there anything that you want to mention before we leave?
No, I appreciate you taking the time. I love the Japanese people. So it's my favorite place in Asia. Don't tell anyone I told you that. And I look forward to meeting with you in person soon and just stay up to date with Abstrct and Pudgy. And we got some exciting stuff coming.
Sounds great. Okay. Thank you so much. Have a nice day.
Later.